Scott Silverman knows all of this, how this works in the real world. He's a crisis coach, veteran treatment provider. Scott, good to have you back here. This is the season, of course, for substance abuse, unfortunately, during the holidays in a lot of ways. Not to make light of that, but, people deal with this on a lot of levels. The worst case is what's happening on the streets. We've seen a lot where Sacramento and local governments will mandate certain things. What's the reality here? Because January 1st is next Wednesday. That's supposed to go into gear. What happens here?
Well, first, happy holidays, and thanks for having me back. I think to answer your question, I don't know what's going to happen. I think that we're going to put more pressure on law enforcement to become more of a social worker. And I think the idea that they can now arrest and potentially put people in jail or potentially prison, depending upon their history. And we've always said, we're not going to arrest our way out of this problem with homelessness. We're talking about individuals who, if they've been on the streets for any length of time, suffer from mental health issues, substance use disorders, and they're concerned about themselves but don't have a way out. And for us to keep postponing the inevitable, to me, it's unexcusable. It's just not a good answer because we've known about these problems for years. The affordable housing issue in San Diego has gone on for decades, and we haven't gotten better at it. And the population continues to grow, so there's a missing link here somewhere. And I think we spoke about it before. Yeah. Leadership needs to create some systemic change and put some people in charge that really know how to sustain individuals with resources that will get them better and out of the system, but not keep them in.
Right, and there's a lot of people who don't want to be in any sort of a system. I've met them, you've met them, in these facilities, or not necessarily in the facilities, just out in the streets or in the canyons or riverbeds and that sort of thing. But it seems like as the pressure is on, and we saw earlier this year, Governor Newsom, after the U.S. Supreme Court decision, says, okay, local governments, you need to step it up and clear these encampments, which relates to all of this as well. But there's a lot of that. There's the state saying, local governments, you must do this. You have Mayor Todd Gloria saying, well, the county needs to do more than the city. There's a whole lot of finger pointing. And the reality is next week, we're going to be short of a lot of beds because we're losing other beds in the county as well, and in the city of San Diego in particular, right?
And as the weather grows colder, and as the homeless population, the homeless population doesn't just decrease because the governor says, okay, we're going to put pressure on you. They don't watch the same commercials you and I do. And, I think it was you who mentioned last time we spoke, that Newsom was the one who said 20 years ago when he was, the mayor in San Francisco, that his goal was to end homelessness. So
yeah, last week, just for people who didn't hear that, last week, beginning of last week was the 20th anniversary of then Mayor Gavin Newsom in San Francisco saying he would end homelessness in San Francisco in 10 years. Well, he got busy with other things, I guess.
Yeah, so if he's got the bright lights and the whistle and the megaphone and the platform and now the power and the resources, and he hasn't been able to do it, to suggest to local communities who don't necessarily have the resources, but maybe they do and just need to redirect some of the resources or manage the money differently, it's not realistic to say we're going to take a 20-year-old problem and try to fix it in a year.
The county end of this Voice of San Diego piece, which is well done by Lisa Halberstadt over there, that talks about how the police are, the county directing officers to take more patients picked up on what they call a 5150 hold, take them to crisis stabilization units and keep them for 24 hours rather than hospitals. So there's a whole lot of network here. And again, people say, oh, you guys are talking about homeless again. This is another specific part of this that is a major part of it. But again, this is one of the hundreds of new laws going to effect just next week. You got organizations like Alvarado Parkway Institute, which has an expanded county contract. They can take in patients who need addiction treatment services in a hospital for holds beyond 72 hours. But this has been the challenge, as you know, Scott Silverman, because a lot of times you got people on the streets who are also very aware of how the system works. Now, these aren't the people with the most severe issues, or they may just like working it, and they know that they can get out of the cold for 72 hours. So there's a lot working here with this. And we seem to be doing the same definition of insanity here over and over.
Exactly. I've been in this industry a long time, and it was a joke with the homeless individual. They said, what about insurance? I said, I don't need insurance. I call 911.
Yeah.
And hospitals have to take them in, but you can't expect hospitals to become detox centers and stabilization centers. And Alvarado Park, I mean, they have a limited capacity, and they contract over the years they have with the Border Patrol, so the people they pick up, they'll bring them there if they're inebriated because they have other issues going on. So, and we haven't really increased the beds. And I know St. Vincent's is currently the village is trying to convert beds to detox beds, but they've got to raise resources to do it. They've got to get permits from the city to get it done, and then they've got to get licensed.
Right, and on that one, I'm sorry, I'm also looking at the clock here. They also that eliminated some of the regular beds, right? Because they're converting the facility to this.
Right. They're taking their current physical infrastructure and they're modifying it to be able to provide detox. But they still have to wait for the state to get the certification that they need. And it seems like we can't even, as a county, call the state, which the governor runs, and say, hey, can we get a fast track here? So if we're online, ready to go, and we've raised the monies and we earmarked the resources, can we start providing detox beds in January? It's not going to happen. It's going to be months and months, and they have to raise the money to physically make the switch, unless the city's paying for it, and I'm not aware of it, but I don't have the inside track.
So Scott Silverman, crisis expert here, talking about all this with the coming conservatorship law that goes into effect next Wednesday, January 1st. The year's flown by. If they came to you and said, "Okay, Scott Silverman, give us the magic solution. Give us the elevator pitch," what would that be? How you'd see what would work in your estimation?
We talked about it the last time. You would think the mayor, somebody on the staff listens to your station, or they heard it on my social media. I never got a phone call. First of all, it'd be important. I like to sit at the table with the thought leaders, if you want to call them that, and talk about, look, we have to do intervention, we have to do assessment, and then we have to find ways to put them in a continuum of care. A shelter is not a continuum of care. A shelter is just that. It's like a triage. So the way we're going about it is backwards, and that's why our problems continue to grow. So in my opinion, we need to stop doing what we're doing and take a look at how we're doing it and get the people that really want to see solutions rather than perpetuate their own business serving individuals through an enabling system that will never change if we don't change it.
Yeah, it's interesting when they do have the big gatherings. They had this homeless summit in the last few weeks, and I was amazed at how many people should have been there at that meeting who weren't invited. So, I wasn't even called, and I've reached out to the task force. They don't return phone calls either. The mayor's office doesn't seem to want to talk. So if they're not talking to a guy like me who created a portal for ending homelessness by building, jobs and housing and support services and working with other providers. And if you go back 15 years, Brian Mainshine ran a program called Project 25 with United Way, with about 20 different providers, had a 3-year study, sent it to HUD, and HUD said, we've never had anyone send us a study. Never. Wow.
So, and that outcome worked, and the Hospital Association said, we will give you the money that we save over 3 years. And then when they were asked to give the money, their explanation was, well, we didn't save the money. We never spent the money. Well, you never spent the money because the system that was created to prevent you to have to spend the money worked.
Well, let's hope
so
for
that was real third-party credibility.
Yeah.
So we've already seen ways to do it.
We got to run, Scott. I appreciate it. Let's hope for a dose of common sense to get a good start for the new year, and we'll be talking with Scott Silverman,
Give me a call. I'll be that dose.
Thank you much. More coming up.